It had all the makings of a surefire musical bombshell. From a story based on a hit Broadway comedy, an original Cole Porter score, MGM's finest producer, Arthur Freed, its best director of musicals, Vincent Minnelli, its biggest stars, Judy Garland and Gene Kelly, and all the production value that movie audiences had come to expect from a lavish Technicolor MGM musical. In short, a feast for the senses. But when the film opened in 1948, The Pirate was met with lukewarm critical response, dismissed by the public, and lost money at the box office. After 60 years in release, The Pirate still sparks controversy among movie musical fans. Some tout it as being ahead of its time, while others write it off as a well-meaning failure. But one thing is certain. The peerless team that created the film struggled every step of the way to innovate the musical film as never before. This is the story of The Pirate's stormy journey to the big screen, which is being rediscovered as a musical treasure chest.
There's nothing you can really criticize about the picture unless you don't like it. It's that simple, because it's beautiful. She's wonderful in it, Gene's great in it, the choreography's great, everything's great. It's just if you don't like the film.
When The Pirate premiered in May 1948, it was this coalescence of what the MGM musical had been moving toward for about 7 or 8 years. It was everything that MGM could manifest in 1947-48.
I honestly think that The Pirate is deserving of a kind of reassessment. I think that in many of the published accounts, it's described as a failure, or they say it was not a success when it first came out.
It's too special for a lot of people. And of course, that's the reason why some people love it, because it is so different and so special.
I think The Pirate is ahead of its time. You know, it was ahead of its time then. I still think it's ahead of its time.
The Pirate all began with a 1911 play by Ludwig Fulda called Der Seeräuber. And Alfred Lunt, as a teenager in Wisconsin, had played in that play in school. Well, by 1941, he and his wife, Lynn Fontaine, were the biggest Broadway acting couple, and they commissioned S.N. Behrman to adapt that play as a vehicle for the two of them. It came out as The Pirate, opened on Broadway in November 1942.
It was like a vaudeville. It gave Alfred Lunt an opportunity to do magic and to walk on a tightrope.
The Lunts made it such a success that MGM went in and paid a lot of money in 1942-43. The initial writer on the project was Joseph Mankiewicz. The powers that be at MGM really didn't know, over a year and a half of something like 10 writers, what to do with this property for which they'd paid almost $250,000.
MGM's greatest producer of musicals, Arthur Freed, was informed about the studio's floundering property.
The great scenic designer Lemuel Ayres broached it as a potential musical. Well, that's where things really started to churn. Arthur Freed assigned the #1 musical star at MGM, Judy Garland. Gene Kelly had just come back from World War II, and compounding it, they had Vincent Minnelli, who was married to Judy Garland, who had guided her through her last 3 pictures.
After Meet Me in St. Louis, Arthur trusted him completely. So when he wanted to do The Pirate in such a stylized way, Arthur Freed just said, okay, anything you want.
The Pirate, of course, was intended as a spoof of all the swashbuckling films. And Minnelli and Kelly worked very closely together, and they came up with 2 sort of models. One was Douglas Fairbanks, the great swashbuckler, and also John Barrymore.
The notion of playing the role of a swashbuckling pirate was exactly what he wanted to do.
In the 1930s, Cole Porter had been really riding high in Broadway with shows like Anything Goes and To Barry Was a Lady. They were huge, huge hits. And as he entered the 1940s, his work was starting to show an artistic decline. For the first time since his very early years, actual flops on Broadway. He was really in need of kind of a renaissance, and it was Arthur Freed who called Porter. It was Freed's intention that this film was going to be sort of a comeback for him.
In the case of writing for a film, you almost always know exactly for whom you're writing. And in this case, Porter was destined to write for Judy Garland and Gene Kelly. And he wrote some songs that apparently Arthur Freed didn't think focused enough on their strengths. So we ended up with a whole new group of songs.
Freed was really determined that Cole Porter produce his best work for The Pirate. He really kind of rode hard on it.
In keeping with this idea that the pirate would be just glorious and innovative, Arthur Freed assigned the musical script to Anita Loos and her writing partner, Joseph Than. The time came for the big reading of this script, and Anita said, "We've changed the concept entirely. We do not have an entertainer pretending to be a pirate any longer. We have a pirate who's pretending to be an entertainer," which brought everybody up short, because it would be like, well, Gene Kelly could play a pirate, but he couldn't fake being a bad entertainer or somebody who didn't know how to be an entertainer. So they all just kind of sat there shell-shocked. The bottom line, Anita Loos and Joseph Than's script proved totally unworkable, and Arthur Freed turned to Goodrich and Hackett. In 2 months, they wrote a new script cued into the basic original idea, cued into the personalities of Garland and Kelly, and 7 or 8 songs that Cole Porter had already written.
With a script in place, Arthur Freed assigned the studio's greatest musical arrangers to the project.
Kay Thompson arranged that whole film. She was the best. You know, her vocal arrangements, sensational. She changed the sound of vocalese. She had people doing things that nobody had ever heard them doing before. Mac the Black, they tried many different ways, and they finally pared it down to what it ended up being.
She would improve something, and then improve it some more, and then improve it some more, until it finally went right out the window. You know, you can only improve something too much before you lose it. When they started to make up the sets for the pirate, Minnelli got pictures and paintings and little figures and create scenery, and Jack Martin Smith would create it on the set. Then you bring in somebody like Harry Stradling to shoot the picture. It's like looking at an hour and 40 minutes of the Munchkinland set from The Wizard of Oz. MGM had the palette, but they also knew how to use it.
The Pirate began filming in February 1947, and the first musical number that Minnelli shot, Nina, was staged by Kelly and choreographer Robert Alton.
He used to direct with his feet. He'd take a leg and point his foot and say, "You go over there," but with his foot.
Gene originally met his mentor, Robert Alton, in Pittsburgh. He said, "I'd like you to come to New York and work with me." And Gene wasn't ready to go to New York yet, but Alton said, "You call me when you get there." Gene got his first role on Broadway in an Alton production called Leave It to Me. Gene said he was a magnificent choreographer and probably underrated.
He told me that he had actually seen the Lunts, and he thought Alfred Lunt was marvelous in it and was a kind of a role model for him. Gene Kelly, for the first time really in his screen career, is playing a character who's outside himself, stepping out of being the good-looking boy next door who happens to dance brilliantly.
It was the role that was right up his alley. It was a perfect thing for him. He was so happy because in 1830 there would be no tap dancing, so it was a way for Gene to use ballet and the Spanish dance, gymnastics, all of the athleticism that was really central and core to the kind of dancing that he wanted to do on film.
So often in histories of Hollywood, we're told, oh, well, the pirate took this long to shoot, and it was Judy Garland's fault.
The production notes reveal Judy Garland ill or Miss Garland unable to appear.
We were there at 6 o'clock in the morning for makeup and wardrobe, and we be waiting for Miss Judy Garland. And Mr. Minnelli was biting his fingernails. It's 6 o'clock in the evening, and she still doesn't show up. And so Mr. Minnelli said, "Listen, everybody go home, and I'll call you." It was 3 weeks before they called us. She would get real skinny, then she'd blow up, and then she'd come back down. That wasn't good for her health.
She had been working steadily for all but maybe the first 2 years of her life. She was overworked, she was overstressed. She had had a baby, and then to get back to this same grind again really seemed to trigger something deeper and more dark in her personality.
All those early years had been augmented by the studio-prescribed medication, because she had to be camera thin, and then the sleeping pills at night to counteract the weight pills. She'd already had a couple of nervous breakdowns before she was 22, 23 years old.
People were taking things at night to go to sleep, and they were taking drugs during the day to get through these long days. Gene certainly was, and Judy Garland was. The distinction is that Gene was able to function, and it was very difficult at times for Judy to do that.
There were missed weeks of shooting on The Pirate. Yet this is not temperament or self-indulgence. This is a woman who is just caving in. At that point, she'd come to realize that her marriage was not working. And when your husband is the director, that's pretty difficult.
Jean said she would often snarl. He used the word snarl at Vincent Minnelli. She would not even speak with him for a long time.
It wasn't a way to have to get out there and try to be happy or be a clown. It just didn't work that way.
The song Voodoo, which was to be Garland's second big showcase in the picture, happens in the plotline where Gene Kelly hypnotizes her and she goes into this huge voodoo song and dance. For its time was extremely erotic. One of the most difficult moments in the whole pirate shoot came when they were about to photograph part of the voodoo number. It was at night, lots of fires lit. Judy was not in any shape to work, and she saw the fires. She went right over the edge. She said, "They're going to set me on fire." And she started running to the dance extras, begging them for some Benzedrine.
She began to kind of writhe around him and drape herself around him. She danced with such an intensity that it was both exciting but also a little unnerving.
Louis B. Mayer went down to the screening room and he saw the sensual, erotic Judy Garland and Gene Kelly. He hit the ceiling. He said, "Burn the negative. If that exhibition gets on the screen, we'll be raided by the police." They toned down the staging for Voodoo and had to reshoot great chunks of it. I guess everybody's favorite song from the pirate would have to be a Clown.
Gene thought the movie needed a number in here that's comedic. And Fried said, "We don't have a song." And Gene said, "Well, I'll go talk to Cole Porter." So he went up for lunch, and Gene described this new number. And Porter said, "How about a clown number?" And Gene said, "That'd be great." He got a call the next day from Porter, and Porter had written the entire number plus 5 verses. It was perfect.
The Nicholas brothers could do anything, you know. And the great thing about them was that they didn't dance exactly alike, but they complemented each other so well.
When he choreographed it, Gene put in every flash step. Many of the things are things that Gene did in high school when he and his brother were performing in these amateur nights when they would do kip-ups and flip around and go across the stage on their hands and knees. I mean, it's just insane work.
We were rehearsing this number, and my brother was just going, "Oh," like that. And Gene said, "Wait a minute, Harold, what are you doing?" Say, "Your brother and I, we're rehearsing like mad, and you just there moping around." And my brother would say, "Oh, I got it." He said, "All right, Harold, you have it. Let me see you do it." And so my brother went through the whole routine without one mistake. And brother said, "Da-da, how's that?" And Gene was so mad. He was so mad. Then he said, "Stop everything. Let's go to lunch."
Be a clown, be a clown.
When Judy Garland and Vincent Minnelli saw the number, they decided that Judy wanted to do it. It was Roger Eden's idea to put it at the end with Judy, and it's very charming.
That whole conceit of edging a partner over to the proscenium arch and having them hit over the head with an Indian club, there's age-old vaudeville shtick. It's the kind of thing that Judy just reveled in.
Oh, yeah. Every old vaudeville joke in the world he knew, because he was born into it. You know, the Minnelli brothers circus tent. He had that timing down pat. And because Mama had started in vaudeville, too, they really understood each other on that level. I love the ballet. It looks so beautiful. All of that, you know, all those explosions. And Gene doing those second position tours with his bent knees.
What the Pirate Ballet does is give the audience Judy Garland's character's point of view. She has just discovered, supposedly, that Gene Kelly is really the legendary Mac the Black, that he's not a traveling player. He's this fierce, horrific pirate. And the ballet comes in, so the audience goes into Judy's mind, and she just imagines Gene Kelly in his 1947 equivalent of hot pants.
He got the most fan mail from that. He said he got lots of MASH notes from that. When he's twirling the spear and jumping up and climbing ropes and sliding down, it was all part of a very calculated thing to create the greatest sense of a kinetic movement. You have to remember that the film is a two-dimensional medium. And this was always a challenge with Gene. You have a three-dimensional art form, and you're trying to put it in 2 dimensions. Jean said that with the use of color and light, you could fool the camera and create a sense of a third dimension. For Jean, it was important, this combination of masculinity and grace, that you could be a man and be graceful, that it wasn't necessarily something that didn't go together.
They had spent so much time waiting for Judy. They had spent so much time being creative and going off into these flights of fancy. They really were going way over. When they finally had a rough cut together in late August, early September 1947, the general reaction was wonderful. But there were qualifications. They didn't like the voodoo number. They thought there should be more romantic episodes between Judy and Jean. But the basic feeling was that this was going to be a big hit. Well, then they took it out and showed it to the public for the first time in October 1947, and people walked out of the screening. But a lot of the people who stayed and filled out comment cards afterwards, you know, were really kind of declarative in saying, in effect, what are you doing? After the second preview, they came back in, rewrote parts of the script, cut voodoo. They took You Can Do No Wrong and put it into a romantic reconciliation scene. They cut out the first version of Love of My Life, which preview audiences had liked very much, and put it in at the end of the movie. And there's this reprise of a ballad that you had not yet heard.
If you look closely at it, you'll see shots of Garland by herself. These were retakes and sort of piecings together that had to be done when she was doing well.
One of the problems with the final edit of The Pirate is that it's like 15 minutes old before there is any music, and then you get a Gene Kelly number, and then you've got to wait 10 minutes more for Judy Garland to sing.
They actually wrapped the entire production of The Pirate on January 1st, 1948, at a final closing budget that was 25% over the original budget.
The Pirate held the record as the most expensive MGM musical for another 15 years until Jumbo in 1962. Minnelli at the time said that it was the merchandising of the film, that it hadn't been sold properly.
MGM had three great selling points in marketing The Pirate. They had Garland, they had Kelly, they had Cole Porter. This was enough. The posters were big and lavish, there were radio spots, there were these new hit songs. Everybody had colossal hopes for that picture.
The Pirate opened June 11th, 1948, to huge success for Radio City, and then apparently began to decline in other areas in the country. Gene said they didn't want to see him dressed as a pirate, and they didn't want to see Judy Garland in a kind of grown-up role.
Gene Kelly later said, we came to realize we had perpetrated this inside joke on the public, that we were being so brilliant we thought everybody was just going to fall at our feet, and about 3 people understood what we were doing.
It was sort of above the heads of the people because it was something they couldn't relate to, because it was so stylized. It's told with such elegance and such style, and that was the Minnelli touch.
It's often now described as a cult picture. I think it goes far beyond that. People love The Pirate. A lot of fans fell in love with this whole romantic notion of being carried away by this mysterious figure.
It's a very special, very particular kind of film, and it requires a special kind of audience, and thank goodness it's finally gotten.